The first time I understood that my son might want me dead, I was standing in my own hallway, barefoot, holding my breath like a child afraid of being caught. I was 58 years old, widowed, and living in the same house I had raised my child in. A house I believed I knew better than my own body. That night it felt unfamiliar, hostile, like it was listening with me. Michael and Laura had moved in 3 months earlier. Temporary, they said. Financial stress, just until they got back on their feet. I didn't hesitate. I never had with my son. After his father died, it had been just the two of us. I worked, I sacrificed, I stayed quiet when I was tired. I believed loyalty moved in one direction because love did. That night, I went to bed early. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty. When I opened my bedroom door, I heard voices drifting up from the kitchen below. Michael's voice first. Low, tight, not affectionate, not casual. "We can't drag this out forever." Laura answered, her voice sharp but controlled. "The longer it takes, the more risk we're carrying. $6 million isn't something you gamble with." $6 million. I froze at the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the banister. My heart slammed so hard I thought they might hear it. "She's healthier than you think," Michael said. "This could take longer." "Then we need to be smarter," Laura replied. "We can't mess this up." They didn't have to say my name. I knew. Earlier that evening, we had eaten dinner together at my table. I cooked like I always did. Pot roast, vegetables, bread still warm. Laura had smiled while organizing my medication, lining the pills neatly in their container. "You need more rest," she said gently. "We'll take care of things." At the time, I thought it was kindness. Standing there in the dark, listening to my son talk about risk and timing, I understood the truth. This wasn't about helping me. It was about collecting me. I went back to my bedroom quietly and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall where my wedding photo still hung. My late husband smiled back at me, unaware of how wrong I had been about the people we raised. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I made coffee like everything was normal. I watched them carefully. Michael avoided my eyes. Laura was overly attentive, too perfect, too controlled. When they left the house, I opened Michael's desk drawer. I didn't feel guilty. I felt focused. Inside was a thick envelope. Inside that, a life insurance policy summary. Insured me. Beneficiaries, my son and his wife. Coverage amount $6 million. I sat down hard in this chair. The room felt smaller, thinner, like the air had been drained out. They had taken out a massive policy on my life without telling me. Paired with whispered conversations about risk and time, it stopped being suspicious. It became a plan. That afternoon, I made 2 phone calls. One to an old friend whose husband worked in insurance for decades. Another to a lawyer whose number I had carried for years, hoping I would never need it. I didn't confront Michael or Laura. Not yet. I needed to know how far they were willing to go, and whether I was already running out of time. That night, for the first time since my husband died, I locked my bedroom door. Fear didn't make me hysterical. It made me precise. Over the next few days, I became very quiet. I played the role they expected the aging mother, grateful for help. Inside, I paid attention to everything. Who touched my food? Who handled my medication? Who decided where I went and when? I started keeping records, not emotions, facts, dates, exact phrases. I hid the notebook inside an old cookbook. Laura hated cooking. She never opened it. Laura insisted on managing my medication completely. I let her, but I counted every pill myself later. Nothing was off, yet. Michael began insisting on driving me everywhere. "Just to be safe," he said. I smiled and agreed while quietly keeping my most important appointments unchanged. When I saw my doctor, he noticed immediately that something was wrong. He asked me one question that mattered. "Do you feel safe at home?" I paused too long. That was enough. He documented everything. That documentation would matter later. My lawyer didn't soften her words. "You need to assume intent," she told me, "and you need protection." She helped me quietly update my legal documents. Power of attorney, medical directives, financial authority. Everything was clean, everything was legal, everything stayed in my control. My friend confirmed the insurance policy was real, recent, and expensive. "People don't spend that kind of money without expectations," he said. That night, Michael brought me tea before bed. I watched his hands as he set the cup down. "I'm not thirsty," I said. After they went upstairs, I poured it down the sink. I installed cameras, small, discreet, legal. Laura started slipping. Her patience wore thin. "How long are you planning to stay independent?" she snapped one evening, then caught herself. "As long as I'm alive," I replied calmly. She didn't laugh. The real moment came on Sunday. Laura announced she had booked me a wellness retreat. 3 days, remote, no cell service, deposit already paid. I smiled. Let me ask my lawyer. The room went cold. A lawyer, Michael asked. For that? So was the insurance policy, I said. They went silent. I slept with the lights on that night. Not because I was weak, but because I finally understood something powerful. If I didn't protect myself, no one else would. And I wasn't done yet. The house changed after that Sunday. Not in ways anyone else would notice. The walls didn't move. The furniture stayed where it was. But the air felt heavier, like everyone was holding something back. Michael and Laura became careful. Too careful. Conversation stopped when I entered the room. Doors closed softly, but deliberately. They knew I was no longer passive. I knew they were dangerous when cornered. I stayed calm. I stayed predictable. I became exactly the version of myself they needed me to be in order to feel comfortable again, a little slower, a little quieter, a little tired. At the same time, I moved quickly behind the scenes. My lawyer advised me not to escalate yet. Let them show their hand, she said. People who believe they're in control always make mistakes. I believed her. Laura increased her involvement in my daily routine. She insisted on cooking most meals. She volunteered to handle my supplements. She offered massages for my shoulders, her hands lingering a moment too long each time. You carry so much tension, she said one evening. Stress is dangerous at your age. At your age. I noted the phrase in my book. Michael began talking about estate planning. Casually, over coffee, like it was an intellectual exercise. Have you thought about simplifying things, he asked? Making sure everything transfers smoothly if something happens. Something happens. I already have, I said, with my lawyer. His smile faltered for half a second. That was enough. The cameras captured more than I expected. Late-night conversations in the kitchen. Laura Googling medication interactions on her phone. Michael pacing voice-low frustration creeping in. She's not declining, he said once. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Laura replied, then we adapt. Adapt. That word stayed with me. The moment that broke the illusion came on a Thursday night. I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door opening. I sat up instantly. Laura stood in the doorway holding a glass of water. Her face was carefully neutral. You left this downstairs, she said. I stared at the glass. My name was etched into it, a gift Michael had given me years earlier. I didn't, I said calmly. She stepped closer. You should stay hydrated, she said. Dehydration can cause confusion. Accidents. Accidents. My eyes flicked briefly to the corner of the room where the camera was hidden. Laura followed my gaze. She froze. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she set the glass on my dresser and backed away slowly like someone realizing too late that they had stepped into traffic. I was just trying to help, she said. Of course, I replied. She left. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told her everything. The retreat, the water, the conversations, the cameras. Her voice hardened. It's time. That afternoon when Michael came home, I asked both of them to sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were copies. The insurance policy, screenshots, notes, a formal letter from my attorney. You took out a $6 million policy on my life without my knowledge, I said. You discussed timelines, risks. You attempted to isolate me. That ends now. Michael went pale. Laura started crying immediately, loud, performative. You're misunderstanding, Michael said. This is crazy. No, I replied. This is documented. I stood up. You have 7 days to leave my house. Laura's crying stopped instantly. Michael stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. They didn't fight me the way I expected. They regrouped. For the first few days, Michael tried reason. He talked about stress, money, miscommunication. Laura played the victim, claiming exhaustion, misunderstanding, love twisted by fear. I listened. I said nothing. On the fourth day, the tone changed. Michael became angry. You're destroying this family, he snapped. Do you know how this looks? I met his gaze. I know exactly how it looks. Laura tried a different approach. She brought up my late husband, my loneliness, my age. You're scared of being alone, she said softly. We were just trying to make sure you were taken care of. Taken care of by $6 million, I said. She didn't answer. On the seventh day, they moved out. I changed the locks the same afternoon. What followed wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. My lawyer contacted the insurance company. A formal investigation was opened. Adult Protective Services were notified. Financial institutions were alerted. The policy was flagged, then frozen, then canceled. Michael called me repeatedly. I didn't answer. Laura sent long messages, explanations, apologies without accountability. I didn't respond. People assume revenge is loud, that it requires confrontation, humiliation, spectacle. They're wrong. Real revenge is watching someone lose the power they thought they already owned. Michael lost his job within months, not directly because of me, but because investigations leave shadows. Laura's small business collapsed quietly when her partners backed away. No one announced it. No one needed to. The house felt different without them. Lighter, safer, mine again. I repainted the guest room. I donated their old furniture. I slept with my door unlocked. I updated my will. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I had mistaken obligation for love, silence for peace, endurance for strength. I wasn't making that mistake again. And the story wasn't over yet. The quiet after they left was not peaceful at first. It was sharp, alert, like the silence that follows a near miss on the highway when your hands are still gripping the steering wheel, even though the danger has passed. For weeks I woke up listening, not for footsteps or voices, but for the absence of them. I had lived most of my adult life with noise. A husband, a child, responsibility humming in every corner of the house. Now the refrigerator clicked on and off, the pipes sighed at night. The house breathed without anyone else inside it. And slowly I realized something unsettling. I felt safer. The investigation moved forward quietly. That was my lawyer's strategy. No threats, no dramatic accusations, just facts delivered to the right places. The insurance company requested interviews, records, timelines. My lawyer handled all communication. I was advised not to speak to Michael or Laura under any circumstances. That was easy. Michael left voicemails at first, angry ones, then pleading ones, then quiet ones that sounded almost reasonable, as if we were still a family negotiating a misunderstanding. I deleted them all. Laura sent messages late at night, long paragraphs about stress, love, fear, how people do things they don't mean when they're desperate. She said she never wanted to hurt me. She said I was misreading everything. She never explained the $6 million. I blocked her number. Adult Protective Services came to my home one afternoon. A woman about my age, calm and direct. She asked about my health, my finances, my daily routine. She asked if anyone had tried to isolate me. Yes, I said, and they failed. She smiled slightly and wrote that down. Neighbors started asking questions. They had seen Michael and Laura move out suddenly. They noticed the locksmith, the cameras. I didn't explain. I didn't deny. I let curiosity do what it always does. At church, people stopped asking about my son. The silence told me enough. One evening, while sorting through old files, I found something I hadn't looked at in years. My husband's handwritten notes from when he was sick. Lists, numbers, reminders. He had always been methodical, protective. I sat at the kitchen table and cried for the first time since everything began. Not because I missed Michael, because I missed the woman I had been before I learned how easily love could be weaponized. My lawyer called me 2 weeks later. The policy has been officially canceled, she said, and internal notes have been added. They won't be able to take out anything like that again. I closed my eyes. Thank you, I said. That's not all, she continued. The financial review raised additional concerns. There's a possibility of further consequences. I didn't ask for details. I wasn't interested in punishment. I was interested in protection. That night I slept without medication for the first time in months. By autumn, the house began to feel like mine again. Not the way it had before when ownership felt assumed, but in a deeper way. Intentional, chosen. I repainted the front door a darker color. Stronger. I replaced the dining table where so many uncomfortable conversations had taken place with a smaller one that suited my life now. I donated clothes I had kept because someone else liked them. Every change felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. Michael tried one last time. He showed up unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, standing on my porch like a stranger who had memorized the shape of my life but no longer belonged to it. I didn't invite him in. I just want to talk, he said. You've talked enough, I replied. He looked thinner, tired, older than he should have. You ruined everything, he said quietly. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I survived, I said. There's a difference. He stood there for a long moment waiting for something. Forgiveness, anger, permission. He got none of it. When he left, I locked the door and felt no guilt. Later that week, my lawyer confirmed what rumors had already suggested. Michael had lost his job. Laura's business partners had stepped away. No official charges had been filed, but investigations leave stains that don't wash out easily. That wasn't karma. That was consequence. Thanksgiving came and went without ceremony. I accepted an invitation from a friend whose husband had died years before mine. 5 women. No expectations. No performance, just food and honesty. At one point, someone asked if I missed my son. I considered the question carefully. I miss who I thought he was, I said. No one pressed further. In December, I updated my will. Not out of revenge, out of truth. I redirected what I had built to causes that mattered to me. Legal aid, women's shelters, education funds for people who didn't have families willing to protect them. I kept enough for myself, enough to live well, enough to never be afraid again. On Christmas morning, I woke early and made coffee. Snow fell lightly outside, covering the street in something clean and temporary. I sat by the window and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief, not because justice had been served in some dramatic way, but because I had chosen myself before it was too late. And I knew with a certainty I had earned the hard way that the worst betrayal of my life would not be the last chapter of my story. Winter lingered longer than usual that year, as if the world itself was reluctant to move on. I understood the feeling. Survival leaves residue. Even when the danger passes, your body remembers. I kept busy on purpose. I established routines that belonged only to me. Morning walks regardless of the weather, coffee at the same corner table every Wednesday, volunteer hours at a legal aid clinic where women my age came in carrying stories that sounded painfully familiar, quiet coercion, financial manipulation, children who believed inheritance was entitlement. I listened more than I spoke. What surprised me most was how often I heard the same sentence. I thought I was overreacting. I used to think that too. Michael didn't disappear completely. He hovered at the edges of my life through other people. A neighbor mentioned seeing him downtown. A friend asked gently if we were speaking again. No, I said, and that was enough. Laura, on the other hand, vanished entirely. No messages, no attempts, no performance. That told me more than any apology ever could. One afternoon, a letter arrived addressed in Michael's handwriting. Thick paper, careful script. I let it sit on the counter for 2 days before opening it. He wrote about pressure, about debt, about how he felt like he was failing as a provider. He said Laura had pushed the insurance idea first, but he had gone along with it. He said he never meant for things to go as far as they did. He never denied the plan. He asked for forgiveness. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. Some words are not meant to be answered. They are meant to be understood and released. At the clinic, a woman in her late 60s squeezed my hand after a long conversation. "You saved your life," she said. I hadn't thought of it that way before. But she was right. At home, I removed the last of Michael's childhood things from the attic. Not angrily, gently. I kept a few photos. I let the rest go. Memory doesn't require storage. The house felt quieter but not emptier. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. Spring arrived softly, almost shyly, as if unsure whether I was ready for renewal. I planted new flowers in the front yard, not the ones Michael liked, not the ones Laura suggested, the ones I wanted, bold colors, deep roots. One morning my lawyer called with final confirmation. All reviews were closed, all flags remained in place. Nothing further could be done without my consent. "You're secure," she said. The words settled into me slowly. Secure. It wasn't just about money or documents or safety anymore, it was about identity. I was no longer someone waiting to be managed. I was managing myself. I hosted a small dinner that month, 4 women, all over 55, all with sharp minds and lived-in strength. We talked about aging, about fear, about the way society quietly expects women to shrink with time. One of them asked, "Do you think they ever plan to stop?" I shook my head. People who see others as assets don't stop. They finish. The table went silent. Then someone raised her glass. 2 unfinished women, she said. We laughed, and it was real. Later that night alone, I sat in the living room with only a lamp on. I thought about my husband, about the life we built, about the trust I had placed in our child. I didn't regret loving deeply. I regretted not protecting myself sooner. There's a difference. Michael tried one last approach in early April. Not a visit, not a letter, a message through a mutual friend suggesting mediation, family counseling, healing. I declined. Healing doesn't require reopening wounds that were closed with intention. On my birthday, I turned 63 quietly. No party, no speeches, just a long walk, a good meal, and a sense of peace that felt earned, not gifted. That night, I wrote something in my journal I wish someone had told me years earlier. Being a mother does not mean surrendering your right to safety. Being older does not mean being expendable. Love does not excuse betrayal. If you're listening to this and something in your life feels wrong but you keep explaining it away, stop. Fear is information, and paying attention to it might save you. The story wasn't over yet, but the ending, whatever it became, would be written by me. The past has a way of resurfacing when you finally stop running from it. Late one afternoon, while reorganizing the filing cabinet in my study, I found an old envelope tucked behind outdated tax records. My husband's handwriting covered the front. Careful. Familiar. The sight of it stopped me cold. I hadn't seen that handwriting in years. I sat down before opening it. Some instincts never fade. Inside were documents I didn't know existed. Not secrets exactly, safeguards. Notes he had written to himself when he was sick, when he knew his time was limited, and his absence would leave me exposed. One page stood out, a handwritten line at the bottom. If anyone ever tries to decide her future without her consent, make sure she has options. Options. He had quietly created a small, separate legal structure years ago. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to ensure that if anyone ever tried to override my autonomy, there would be proof of his intent and my authority. I felt my throat tighten. Michael never knew about it. Laura certainly didn't. I brought the documents to my lawyer the next day. She read them carefully, then looked up at me with something close to admiration. "Your husband was thinking ahead," she said. "These reinforce everything we've already established." I didn't even know I admitted. "That might be why they worked," she replied. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man I had trusted without question had protected me long after his death. The child I had sacrificed for had done the opposite. That realization hurt, but it also clarified something important. Love that respects you plans for your strength. Love that exploits you plans for your absence. Words spread quietly. Not gossip. Truth. The kind that moves through communities without needing amplification. People who once defended Michael stopped mentioning his name. Invitations I used to receive as a couple became singular. I was no longer defined by who I had raised. I was defined by what I had survived. At the legal aid clinic, a younger woman asked me if I was angry. I said. Anger got me moving, but it didn't build what came next. "What did she ask?" "Self-respect," I said, "and documentation." She laughed softly, then nodded. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun set, watching the light fade across the street. The same street Michael had ridden his bike down. The same street I once waited on, worried sick when he stayed out too late. I felt no nostalgia. Only distance. Distance is not cruelty. It is clarity with boundaries. I went inside, locked the door, and slept deeply. Spring turned into summer without asking my permission, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't resist the change. I traveled. Not far. Not extravagantly. Just enough to remind myself that the world was bigger than the rooms where I had been quietly endangered. A small coastal town, long walks, no schedules, no one managing my time. I told no one where I was going. That freedom mattered more than the destination. While I was away, Michael left another message. Short, controlled. He said he understood now that he had made mistakes. He said he hoped someday we could talk as equals. Equals. I listened once. I didn't respond. Equality cannot be requested after dominance fails. When I returned home, the house welcomed me in a way it never had before. Not with familiarity, but with respect. Every object was where I left it. Every decision had been mine. I enrolled in a class at the community center. Financial literacy for women over 55. I wasn't there to learn as much as to contribute. Experience carries weight when it's finally acknowledged. During one session, the instructor asked if anyone wanted to share a cautionary story. I raised my hand. I didn't name names. I didn't dramatize. I spoke plainly about misplaced trust, about paperwork signed too quickly, about how easily concern can become control. The room was silent. Afterward, 3 women approached me privately. Each one whispered a version of the same fear. My son handles my money. My daughter insists I don't need to know details. They say it's for my own good. I gave them my lawyer's number. That felt like payback in its purest form, not punishment. Prevention. One night, sitting at my desk, I opened my journal and reread the early entries. The fear, the suspicion, the quiet terror of realizing the people closest to me might not value my life the way I did. I barely recognized that woman. Not because she was weak, but because she was alone in her knowledge. I wasn't anymore. If you're listening to this story and wondering what revenge looks like at this age, let me tell you, it looks like living. It looks like refusing to be erased. It looks like choosing dignity over denial. And if you've stayed with me this long, it means something in this story touched you. Share your thoughts, tell your story, stay connected. Because silence protects the wrong people, and truth spoken clearly saves lives. By late summer, I stopped being surprised by my own strength. That may sound strange, but strength doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up quietly in ordinary moments when you realize fear is no longer making decisions for you. I noticed it the day my phone rang, and I didn't feel a jolt of anxiety when I saw Michael's name. I let it go to voicemail, not because I was angry, not because I wanted to punish him, because I no longer felt obligated to manage his emotions. That was new. For most of my life, motherhood had trained me to absorb discomfort, to smooth things over, to explain, excuse, endure. I had confused responsibility with self-erasure. Now silence felt like honesty. A mutual acquaintance later told me Michael was struggling. Financially, emotionally, that his marriage was under strain, that he felt lost. I listened without satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. This was reality catching up. People sometimes expect women my age to soften with time, to blur boundaries in the name of peace. What they don't understand is that peace without dignity is just a quieter form of harm. I didn't harden, I clarified. One afternoon while volunteering at the clinic, I sat with a woman who reminded me painfully of my younger self. Early 60s, recently widowed, adult children helping her manage finances. They say I don't need to worry, she told me, that it's better if I don't know everything. I looked her in the eyes and said, anyone who benefits from your ignorance is not protecting you. She cried. So did I later in my car. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I finally understood how common this story is and how rarely it's spoken aloud. At home, I continued preparing for the future on my terms. I reviewed my documents annually. I met with my lawyer regularly. I chose transparency over trust without verification. That didn't make me cold. It made me free. Michael sent one final letter in September. No excuses this time, no blame, just an acknowledgement of harm and an acceptance of distance. I see now that I tried to control what I was afraid to lose, he wrote. I believed him. That didn't change my decision. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Understanding is not access. I placed the letter with the others, closed the drawer, and felt no urge to reopen it. For the first time in decades, my life was not organized around someone else's expectations. It was organized around my safety, my values, my time. If that sounds selfish to you, I invite you to ask yourself who benefits when women are taught that self-preservation is a flaw. I had stopped explaining myself, and nothing bad happened. On a quiet morning just before my 64th birthday, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and watched sunlight move slowly across the floor. The house was still, not empty, not lonely, still. I thought about how close I had come to losing everything without ever realizing I was in danger. How easily love had been used as leverage, how quickly concern had turned into calculation. $6 million. That number no longer scared me. What scared me was how invisible I had almost become in my own life. I had spent years believing that being a good mother meant stepping back, trusting blindly, making myself smaller so others could feel secure. I had learned the hard way that there is a difference between generosity and surrender. This story is not about hating your children. It is about refusing to disappear for them. Michael and Laura are no longer part of my daily life. That fact still carries sadness, but it no longer carries shame. Estrangement is sometimes the cost of self-respect. I pay it willingly. I have rebuilt my life around intention. Friendships that are reciprocal. Routines that nourish me. Work that gives meaning without draining me. And I sleep. Deeply. If there is a lesson here, it is not about revenge in the dramatic sense. I did not seek to ruin anyone. I did not celebrate anyone's downfall. I simply removed myself from harm. That was enough. To the women listening to this who recognize pieces of themselves in my story, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not paranoid. You are not overreacting. You are not too old to matter. Your instincts are data. Your life has value. Your consent is not optional. If someone benefits from your silence, your confusion, or your trust without transparency, that is not love. That is exploitation. Revenge at this stage of life looks different. It looks like living long enough to tell the truth. It looks like keeping your name on your own life. It looks like dignity. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences matter, and someone else may need to hear that they're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories about family drama, betrayal justice, and the quiet power of reclaiming yourself after 55, stay with me. Subscribe. Come back. Because the truth they hide only has power in the dark. And we're done whispering now.